Hello, this is Mark Tucker.
And this is Alan Furstenberg, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Welcome, Alan.
Welcome, Mark. Good to see you again.
Thank you. It's nice to be seen.
It's always nice to be seen, to know that you're out there, isn't it? I mean, just
Yeah.
to know you're part of something bigger than yourself. I
Yeah.
don't know where this was going, but
No. It just made me think of like this last week. I saw somebody on Twitter saying, "Hey, I wrote my first conversation, conversation flow," and I just had to write back and say, "Welcome to the community. So happy that you're here." It's just
that is wonderful. We've had more people joining, more brand new people joining Voice Lunch recently who are like, yeah, I'm just getting into conversation design and I'm, trying to understand it. And they'll join office hours and they'll just be there quietly, not asking too many questions, but kind of, absorbing everything we're saying. And every so often I'll check in, I'm saying, are you getting anything out of this? And they're like, oh yeah. Yeah. Keep going.
Keep going.
It's great when we get these new people joining the community and learning more and doing more. That's always wonderful.
Yeah. So if you're out there on social media, and you come across somebody who's excited, they're just getting started, and they're kind of like, "Hey, I did this thing," then just take a moment and say congratulations on that thing. It's cool to be seen and recognized and feel like you're welcome in a community.
Yep. And we do want to welcome more people in this community. I think there's a lot that we've only started working with, and we've got a lot of people who have so much to contribute. And I'm always excited to see what new people are bringing into, you'll pardon this pun, the conversation.
So I thought like today we could cover a topic that we've mentioned before, but we haven't talked about recently, is TTS, text to speech.
Text to speech. And there's a lot of different angles to that. We kind of always just assume that it's there, but there's always so much that we have to cover. We've covered this on a number of episodes in the past, but I think it's a good time for us to revisit it.
Yeah, and that's something that you use every day when you're doing either on the developer or design side of voice experiences, is trying to understand, is this response that's coming back from the assistant, is that going to be text to speech? Is it going to be voiceover? Is it going to be a mix? So there's just kind of an interesting understanding of what you want to do with that. And this is a voice medium, it's voice first. So you want to make sure that you have top-notch experiences, whether you're using a smart speaker or if you want to add a screen and make it multimodal, but you still want to have that conversation be strong. And the tools that you would have as a visual designer, like creating a web page, would be things like, CSS and other things like that. But like, what do you use to format text to speech? It's because there's lots of different ways to speak a sentence. You could speak it in such a way that it's like exciting or sad or
and you've got different voices. And it's interesting. One of the questions that I had gotten recently was, why, wouldn't it be great if we had this notion of CSS for audio? And the answer is, we used to have CSS for audio. CSS used to have what they referred to as oral, AURAL, style sheets, or oral styles that you can include in a style sheet. And that proposal has, fallen. It's no longer under active development. Right. But it was interesting to see that at one point they were looking into these sorts of questions of, what's the equivalent of a font family when you're talking about audio? And how do you, for a chunk of text that's on a page, how do you style it so that it can be read aloud?
Right.
And it was interesting discussions. And I hope those are eventually returned. And one of our listeners, Andy, was the one who got me looking into this, because she's very excited about these sorts of things. And it would be exciting to see that sort of technology brought back up and see what we can do with it now that we know a lot more. But that's not what we have right now.
Yeah, and that was one of the first things that I had to learn is like, well, if I'm creating this Alexa skill, for example, how do I get this voice, this to come back? Like, what if the thing I'm returning back is the name of a location and Alexa just doesn't pronounce it correctly? What do I do? Can I even use that word? And so then that led me into, well, there's just this way that you can format text called speech synthesis markup language, SSML. And so there's a whole spec on SSML, and it's been around for a long time, and it's just been adopted by all these different voice assistant platforms. But if you're even writing your own custom assistant, you can use different cloud services or APIs that are available out there to turn a text string with formatting into audio, into an audio file, basically.
Right. And when we're talking about that, that includes things like, determining what type of voice we wanted to use. Do we want a deeper voice? Do we want a higher pitch voice? How quickly do we want them to speak?
Right.
But those types of things are the sorts of things that SSML can control. Where do we want to put in spacing or pauses?
Yep.
And now with some variants, which voice we're going to use. With other variants, do we want to use an excited tone, or do we want to have background audio with it? So there's a lot of things that SSML on different platforms offer.
Right.
And one of the great endeavors that you did early on was trying to map out which features were available on which platforms.
Yeah, that was. So I created a website that's still out there called SSML.Guru, and it's got all the different elements and attributes for the SSML spec. And there's actually two specifications, like the 1.0 spec came out in 2004, and the 1.1 came out in 2010. So it's been 12 years since there's been an update to SSML. But if I'm on Alexa Assistant, like Alexa, then what's the tags? If I'm on Google Assistant, if I'm wanting to do something custom and use something from the AWS platform like Amazon Poly or other things, then what SSML tags are supported or not. So it's I guess kind of talking about it. SSML is XML based, like HTML is XML based, so there's different tags with attributes, begin tags, end tags. So this website will kind of give you an idea of like, is this supported? Is this not supported? And that's what something I hit and was interested in early on is like, if I'm doing a voice experience for both of these platforms, can I use the same SSML, or do I have to customize that based on what platform it is?
Now, and actually, I meant to ask you something. You used a term earlier. So SSML lets us do text to speech, or TTS. And that's
Right.
kind of exactly what it sounds like. Given text, or given text that has markup applied to it, let's turn that into audio. You also used a term voiceover. When you say voiceover, what do you mean by that?
So some of the experiences that I've done in the past, especially working through agencies, is sometimes you want a voice experience where you want a specific personality. It could be like a celebrity doing a game show. It could be a specific person talking about products that they represent, or different things like that. So in order to do that, just like what you would do in a movie or a video game or something, you go out and find a voiceover artist. This could be either a professional voiceover artist, or it could be the celebrity or entertainer or whatever that you want to represent this. And you have them read off certain sentences, and you record that audio. And then inside of SSML, there's the ability to include short form audio, short clips of audio as part of the formatting of that SSML. And so you can just, instead of where the text would be, just say, play this audio file here. And if you want to do a hybrid, it would be a mix of this audio file with the celebrity saying something, and then usually, Alexa in this case, asking the question, adding a prompt, something that would be variable, that could change, that would be kind of difficult to keep doing voiceover stuff.
Right. So voiceovers are the case where you have a pre-recorded audio, the pre-recorded
audio,
static audio.
Yeah. but that's also coming into this, that I've seen more and more of, is this ability to have somebody record, like them reading something and then create a custom
custom
TTS
voice.
voice.
That's where I was
on
going as well.
Yeah, so that we're seeing that a little bit more, and that would kind of be more of a situation. Usually these platforms would, you could still then pass text to it and it would come back with the audio, but it would be like in the voice of the celebrity or close to it.
Yeah.
But then that would be
based on-
an additional API that you would call that would be specific to that platform and say, here's the text, give me the audio file for that.
Right. So I know there are a number of third parties that are doing that sort of thing, some of which will, again, you give them SSML and they give back this audio stream of, based on that voice and based on the SSML guidance. And I know both Alexa and Google have custom voice services where well, in both of their cases, they are recording celebrities and creating these custom voices. But I'm pretty sure both of them also let you create a custom voice for outrageous amounts of money that they don't publish.
I'm sure if I had the right amount of money, I'm sure I could have a custom Mark Tucker voice. Not that anybody would really choose that, but you could have that.
I mean, and that's actually one of the fun things that I guess this is a little outside of the SSML discussion. But for example, we've talked about how we edit this program using a product called Descript.
Yeah.
One of the features that Descript offers in an advanced package is the ability that you could record your own voice, what they call overdub, I believe. And for minor changes, you can edit the script and it will edit the audio using your own voice.
Interesting.
And it's a really cool feature, and it's not that expensive. It's not cheap, but it's not that expensive. And for those kinds of situations, it's a great way just to make, small edits of, a couple of words at a time.
Yep.
Longer than that, and it starts getting noticeable that it's not quite right. But a couple of words, it works really well for. So yeah, this is definitely technology that is out there and is coming. And we know companies that are, you give, like I said, you give it the SSML and it'll give back an audio stream based on the voice that it has built for you, based on your voice or a celebrity's voice, or a voice actor who you've chosen for this product or whatever. Right. So they're out there.
Yeah. Now you mentioned earlier, you talked about, specifically Amazon's cloud offering and Google's cloud offering. Now, interestingly, AWS, Amazon Web Services, has Amazon Polly. Mm-hmm. And you can pass in a text string or a formatted text string that includes SSML, and you can get back an audio file that has that response. And that's an independent service that you could use for lots of different situations if you want.
And to be clear, before you go on, I just also want to say Google has the same thing. I think they call it Google Text-to-Speech or Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. And it is totally separate from the Google Assistant. So while Actions on Google is going away, Google Cloud Text-to-Speech is not going away. And I think it's also important to note that Azure and a bunch of others also have the same kind of service.
Yeah.
Not that I remember what any of them are or have tried too many of them out, but some of them are very good. I believe IBM's, for example, is actually a very good product.
Yeah, and there are lots of different providers that do support text-to-speech. There is also some of those same features from Polly that are integrated in with Alexa. So, for example, Polly has lots of different named voices depending on which country that what language you're wanting to have it speak in. So, like a prominent male voice would be Matthew, and the equivalent female voice would be Joanna. And you can use those in Polly, but you'll also notice that there are special voice tags inside of SSML for Alexa itself, and you'll see Matthew and Joanna are options, and it's the same voice. It's just a tighter integration already. And that's part of the reason why this SSML.Guru document is, because there is a standard, but then Google added some things to do mixed audio, and Alexa added some of its own custom tags for how it supports voices or other things. And so those are the kind of things that you're going to run into, especially if you're doing something cross-platform, across multiple providers, that you'll have to kind of understand on how can I format this, or how do I keep track of like this is going to be for this platform and this is going to be for this other platform.
Now I know one of the things that I always found, I guess, interesting was on the Google side, the SSML engine for the Google Assistant or for actions on Google was behind the scenes Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. So when Google Cloud Text-to-Speech made some updates, those automatically rolled onto the actions on Google side. The impression I get when I've talked with Alexa developers, and when I work with you, and when I see questions, and when you and I chat, is the Alexa SSML is almost the same as the Poly SSML, but they're not quite the same. And there's often this reference of, oh, I'm using a Poly voice. Is that, do you need to do something different? Do you need to, is there a flag you need to set? Or, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I don't have 100% answer on this, but I think behind the scenes, the integration for multiple voices in Alexa is really just Poly. Now there might be some optimizations. Who knows exactly what they've done on that? So I haven't tracked this, but I would suspect that if they made an update, added a new voice or an improvement to a voice in Poly, then that would just kind of show up in Alexa. I think that's true. But there are some tags that are supported in Poly that aren't supported in Alexa.
Oh, interesting.
And one of those is the mark tag, actually, where that you can, maybe that's the reason why I noticed it. But if you're doing Poly, you can have certain tags that at certain points in the conversation, as the text-to-speech is going through, and I have to look at this closer again, but it's almost like little events would get raised at different points in time. So if you wanted to have something show on a screen and you're telling a story, and at a certain point in the story, something happens, you could change something on the screen to match where you were in the story. I think that's kind of the intent of it. I haven't really seen it in practice, and I haven't done that myself.
That's certainly how it worked on the conversational actions with interactive canvas. Is a mark tag would raise an event on in the JavaScript that was running on the canvas. But I am curious how that would work with APL.
Yeah, well, but that's not supported. That's not those mark tags are not supported with Alexa SSML. So
interesting.
You can't really test it. But you could conceptually, at least, I think, write a custom assistant that used a Poly, use Poly itself, and you might be able to trigger different actions that happen based on different parts of the sentence. But that's an experiment for another day.
I know that in Google Cloud Text-to-Speech, the mark tag is there. It's obviously supported. And the way it works is that it doesn't raise an event, but it tells you when you get the stream back, it tells you, okay, at 1.2 seconds into the stream is where this mark occurs. And at 2.1 seconds is when this mark occurs. So there's no event,
and that might actually be the way that it's supported in that case. I have used and seen the interactive canvas marking of different things, and that's actually been pretty cool, because you could have something where somebody's like, congratulations, you got this question right. And so then at that point in time, you get the answer to the question that's shown. That's like, and then it's like, let's move on to the next question. At that point in time, the new question is shown. Otherwise, you get this you get this round trip weirdness where the thing that's coming back has to on the screen has to show you way more
right.
of
Or
what, yeah,
right. Or it's way out of sync and you're,
yeah,
having that nice synchronization was always really nice.
yeah. I was always impressed with interactive canvas on that aspect of it. Goodbye interactive canvas. Goodbye third-party voice experiences on Google Assistant.
Okay. We're not going to dwell on this. We're talking
All right,
about
sorry.
SSML. No, I agree totally, but we're not going to dwell right now.
All right.
Anyway, so one of the other cool things that I again, you need to get the credit for this, is, well, although SSML is sort of cross-platform, it's not quite cross-platform.
It's a standard that has multiple flavors.
Right, like all standards do. And you did something great to try to address that fact, and that was speech markdown.
Yeah, so the idea of speech markdown was, I guess, a couple of fold. One, just like you can code stuff with HTML, you can also use a simpler version called Markdown, which is just a simpler syntax for highlighting, creating bullet lists, making things bold, whatever else that you're doing in your text formatting for display. So my idea was, well, what if there was something called speech markdown, and what would that look like? So it is some of those similar tags, but adopted for voice. So no longer are you formatting your text with XML, SSML tags, you're formatting it with speech markdown tags. And that could be like, put some more emphasis here, put a pause here, 2-second pause here, put a, all that stuff that you would do, but just kind of in a simpler format. And so that would be, that's the speech markdown part. So that's part one. The second part was that speech markdown would then be translated into SSML differently based on which platform you're on. So if I had this speech markdown and I wanted to then, I needed SSML to pass back to the Alexa service to actually generate the TTS, I could say, give me the Alexa version of SSML based on this markdown. So you could really use the same markdown across multiple platforms, and then depending on which platform you're on, you would get a different output. And you could even just say, strip all of the markdown tags, just give me the text. And so then you could get the text of that for platforms that didn't support SSML, or if you wanted to display the text on the screen and then speak it. But the idea behind that is that where the tags were the same across platforms, then they would be the same thing. If there wasn't a tag supported, then maybe there's some sort of a smart equivalent of it. So like there wasn't a whisper tag in Google Assistant, but if I were to lower the volume and then speak a little slower, then I could kind of simulate a whisper. So it would be kind of a rough equivalent, or it would just remove the tag completely, and you would just end up without any formatting on that. But those were kind of the main points of speech markdown.
So very cool. And I think one of the other, that I found kind of nifty is that actually not you, it was one of the community members then created a Jovo plugin for speech markdown.
So yes, and this is for Jovo version 3. So this was actually in coordination with the Jovo team itself, but I worked with them and said, hey, we've got this functionality. I've got most of the code written. This would be what you would do. How do I package that up into a plugin? And that was kind of one of my first plugin paths was that integration, working with them to, how do I create a Jovo plugin to do that? Still need to do that for Jovo version 4. I think I've got enough plugins under my belt under version 4 that I think I know enough now that I can do this. So at some future point, there will probably be a speech markdown plugin for Jovo 4. But that's nice, because with Jovo you can write cross-platform. You can have the text be the same, and it knows that at this point in time, this request that I'm dealing with is an Alexa request or some other request type. And so then you can do that. What's also cool is though other people have actually added to speech markdown and added their own implementations for other platforms. So you can check out speechmarkdown.org is the website, and there's a link to the GitHub page on that, and you can look at the code and add stuff to it or whatever. And so it's just been a fun project that I've found useful.
No, I've definitely found speech markdown useful. It's now one of the required modules in multivocal. That all responses are handled as speech markdown unless you specify otherwise at this point. And that's just been, it's really made it far easier to do a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, kind of offloads the processing of figuring out how do I have to format this. It just makes the designer and developers jobs easier.
What did I see this week that or recently that there's now also a poly plugin for Jova?
Yes, so this was actually something that thanks to company I work for, Rain, their contributions to the open source community. It was something that a project that I had worked on, and got their approval to go ahead and contribute that. So now it is actually part of the base Jova framework. You can go to the Jova website to Marketplace, and there's a new TTS section, and you'll see two plugins. The first one is the Poly TTS plugin. So what that will do is that now as you just use use Jova, there's a step at the very end where you have your platform specific response output. It will go and find the speech and the prompt or the speech and the reprompt tags that are part of that output, and it will run that through Poly as text and come back with an audio file, and it will replace that with an SSML tag for an audio file. So then you've got your audio. You would probably use this plugin if you're writing a custom assistant and you don't want to have whatever the base like TTS that's built into Chrome or whatever you want to control that. Mm-hmm. So with this plugin, you give it some information on AWS of like how do I connect to Poly on AWS in your specific account. You can specify that you want Matthew's voice or some other things. And so every time a response comes back, it takes that, finds the text string, and it sends that off to the Poly API and comes back with the audio. So the second plugin is actually an optimization because it costs money, right? Every time you do a translation, even if you're doing a translation of the exact same phrase, it's you're processing it to Poly, and Poly is going to charge you money for doing that. So that's more expensive than if you were to cache it. So I've also built and is available a TTS cache that uses Amazon S3. So what happens with that is it will go check Amazon S3 and see if the audio file is there. If it's not, it's going to go ahead and call Poly and get the audio back, and it's going to actually do like a MD5 hash of the sentence, the string that turned that in, and so now that's the key for lookup, and it will go ahead and subsequent times when you're asked for that exact same key, it's going to give you back the cached audio as opposed to making that Poly call. And what's really cool about S3 is that you can set that up as a public web, in essence, a website. So really all the thing that you're doing at that point in time is you're checking to see, does S3 have an object in this specific bucket that has this? And if it does, then it gives you what the URL string would be for that thing. And so then you just play that audio right out of the S3 bucket. So saves you money. And
no, very straightforward. And and again, it ends up just being a module that's there. So it's not like you need to do a lot of extra work.
Nope.
It's just the same as if you had called it out and gotten it back, and you don't know if it came from cache or not. Doesn't matter to you as long as the user gets it.
Yep. And also, like if you've got a little bit longer text, if you've got something like 2 or 3 sentences, there's a certain amount of latency. So the very first time it might take a little bit longer to get that audio back, but once it's cached, and it's going to be cached for all your users, right?
Right. And it also means that you have, one of the advantages of SSML is that it can be dynamic, and you want it to be dynamic. I mean, if you're returning a user's information and telling them, there are currently 23 widgets, well, you don't want to have to record somebody saying there are 23 widgets, there are 24 widgets, there are 25 widgets. So you want to be able to automatically generate it, but at the same time, you want to be able to, then have the prompt, what would you like to do next? You're not going to change that all that much. So you want that cached, you want the generated one generated, and you as a developer don't want to care, is really what it boils down to.
Yeah, that's true. You don't really want to care about that part. And what's kind of nice about how this all works though too is that it just caches things behind the scenes. Now your storage in S3 is really pretty cheap. So that's not a big concern, but I guess if you did have a concern that like, well, what if this thing's only said one time and now it's not being cached? You could do something and get fancier. The easiest thing would be set up some sort of a rule on the S3 bucket that says after 30 days, just delete anything that's older than 30 days. And so then, okay, sure, this other thing that's used frequently will get charged again, poly, like once a month, but then it will be cached again. And these other things that were like just one-offs will just get cleaned up, and you won't have to pay for those anymore. So there's strategies that you can use.
Right. And that starts turning into your control of saying, well, okay, if this is something that's only queried, once every month, what are the storage costs versus the regeneration cost?
Yep.
And you can look at the cost and say, well, regenerating this is going to cost me X cents, while storing it costs me Y cents. And I can now, it's pretty straightforward math. At what point is it cheaper for me to regenerate it versus at what point is it cheaper for me just to keep it around on the rare chance that it gets hit?
Yep, that's true. And instead of every 30 days, it could be every 90 days. It could be once a year. It could be, whatever you want to do. It's
what makes the most sense for your environment. And that's incredible. That's a great way to manage costs when you need to go that route.
Yeah.
So that's a very cool plugin. I might have to check that one out. So let's see. We covered most of SSML, the various differences, the various similarities. I don't know, anything else we need to bring up? Oh yeah, I actually do have kind of a question.
Okay.
Now I know we've got APL and we have APL for audio.
Yes.
And I know sometimes we can include SSML and sometimes we can't. And what do we know?
Okay, you are asking me a question about something I don't know a lot about. I know the kind of the intent of APL for audio. So Google Assistant solved I want background music while text is being spoken. They handled that with certain tags inside of SSML.
By adding some custom tags. Let's be clear there. It's exactly. They're not standard, they are Google's tags.
Yes, they are definitely Google's tags. So that's how that was handled. For some reason, the Alexa team that was behind this decided that instead of doing it that way, they were going to tackle that with APL audio. Now, you could still have the typical SSML response coming back and just use APL to show a screen, but there are also things that you can do to say, I'm showing this screen, and inside of APL, then you can play audio or speak things. And that's, one of the examples of that is if you've got a thing of text and you're reading through and you want to highlight the words as it's going through, it's called karaoke mode. that you can do that, but in order to do that, you have to do the audio portion inside the screen. So I haven't really played around with that a lot, mostly because I'm creating experiences that are for screens and for speakers, for smart speakers. And I
And
didn't want to have to do things differently based on if I'm in a screen or not, as far as the audio side of things. I'm sure there's reasons why they did that, and there's probably a whole rich things that you can do with that, but I just haven't really explored it. It
okay,
just
fair
hasn't
enough.
been something that's been a high priority.
I mean, and it didn't occur. I mean, I had seen somewhere in there that you can include the text as part of APL, and it didn't occur to me that that meant that that wouldn't work on a smart speaker. But of course, it makes sense that it wouldn't work on a smart speaker because
To
right.
get APL, you have to do a directive returning back, and there's no reason to do an APL directive if you don't have a screen.
I'm not even sure it would work.
Yeah, I
It probably wouldn't.
probably would.
Yeah.
Might even error. Who knows?
Yeah. Anyway, okay. I don't know, anything else about
No,
audio that we need to look at?
nope. I just play around with it. It's there's lots of things to check out if you're kind of curious on how different platforms handle different audio, and you want to jump right, have links that jump right into the documentation. Check out SSML.guru. If you're
We'll
interested
include
in
a bunch of links below.
the concept about speech markdown, there's that. We'll include a link to the TTS stuff on Jovo Marketplace for Jovo 4. There's lots of different things for you to check out. And
Yep. And I think the big thing to keep in mind is this is something that works great outside of the assistants. So,
yep.
if you just want to build a text to speech experience, or you're building your own assistant, or you need flexible audio, there are tools out there that you can tap into, and these are some of them.
Yep. Well, this has been fun, Alan. Thanks.
Always is. Thank you very much. And if folks have questions, or have links to other companies or whoever that are doing these sorts of text to speech with custom voices, we'd love to hear about it. Comments below. Find us on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, and of course, we'd love to talk about it another time on Two Voice Devs.
And Two Voice Devs. And just a reminder that if you are in the DC area in October, we will both be at Voice Summit, and you can hear a live episode of Two Voice Devs there.
Two Voice Devs live and in person coming this October. I can't wait.
It'll be fun. It will be fun to see you again in person.
Indeed. Take care, folks. Have a good week, Mark.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Ellen.